everybody. Welcome back. This is Psychedelics Lately by Psychedelics Today. How are you doing today, Kyle?
Not too bad. Getting over COVID.
Right.
How are you doing?
Yeah, COVID's always the best. I wish we could do away with it by now, but maybe sooner than later. Yeah. Well, thanks for doing it despite the recovery process. All sorts of fun stuff to talk about.
Yeah, it'll be fun to dig back in. We kind of converted this to Psychedelics Lately versus what we used to call it Psychedelics, Weekly, and then our Solidarity Friday episodes.
Yeah, that was really great. And I love doing that with you. And I think we did a lot of really great stuff there and hope we can recapture some of that magic.
Yeah.
So the hope, everybody, is to do this on a monthly basis, if not more often, if we can fit it in. And we'll just get back into this groove of sharing our insights about the news in greater frequency than we have been lately. So, Psychedelics Lately. Cool. So, I want to talk about Massachusetts. This is the current ballot initiative. I think the only ballot initiative that looks like there's a good chance it might pass to legalize regulated psychedelic access. There's also a pretty robust decrim framework. Some aspects of it I like more than Colorado. Some aspects I don't like as much, but I'm very for this one. Have you done any reading or learned much about this program yet?
Yeah, I've dug into it a little bit. I've been following that and the New Jersey one a bit. But yeah, it sounds like you've been following it a little bit more. I know you're just in Massachusetts and on the East Coast. And so you probably have some better insight here. So yeah, I would love to maybe hear a little bit more about what you know about the bill.
Well, it's nearly identical to Colorado. So there will be a regulated, licensed framework for, government tested effectively, like government approved framework to do legal therapy where there's licensed grows, licensed testing facilities, licensed facilitators, and licensed facilitation facilities where people can receive services similar to what we see in Oregon, but probably more like what we're going to see in Colorado, where there is actually a kind of some way that this looks a little bit clinical. And, it's really interesting, right? This idea that state licensed legal models are going to be clinical when this bucks the frame of what we see at the federal level. Like the feds usually set a lot of the rules around what is clinical and what isn't, right? So, I find it fascinating, and I love that the feds are going to have a challenge to kind of like understand how to treat it. We haven't seen any real raids in Oregon post legalization, so that's a good sign.
There are things that we haven't heard about, but we probably would have heard about it if something happened.
Totally. Imagine if they take out one retreat center. It'd be so crazy, and I would love to see that blowback. It would be really interesting. And then Colorado, we haven't really seen too much legal activity, legal action. There have been some cease and desists on churches, but we haven't seen like too many people get in big trouble here in Colorado, which is great too. So in Colorado, what we have is effectively legal possession, grow, transfer of psilocybin, mescaline, DMT, iboga as well, but you can't actually transfer iboga. I don't really know how you're growing iboga in Colorado anyway, but it's an interesting question, and I think there is interest at the state level to start digging in on iboga. But I talking to Sean McAllister the other day, like a former attorney of ours and friend and colleague, he was saying that we're probably not going to see activity on that until 26. Mm-hmm. So, Colorado has very carefully laid out what the rules and regs are. They're still working through it. We don't actually even have final laws yet, which is super crazy because we're less than 2 months away from this going live. We're moments away from applying for our Colorado training license as well. Like, I hope we can pull that off in the near term.
It's been in the works, yeah. Some delays with different things, retreats and sicknesses and all that stuff. But yeah, it's in the plans. But it also sounds like Massachusetts Yeah, it also sounds like Massachusetts will allow home grow and decriminalization as well. So it sounds like people will be able to grow within a 12 by 12 foot area, which is the same as Colorado. So I'm excited that they did put that into the bill.
Like there's something about being locked behind two doors if there's minors in the house.
Yeah, I guess that makes sense. Yeah, you got to keep kids safe.
Right. Kind of a bummer, but also like I get it. Like we don't really want kids to have to, go through that without like, some sort of conscious agreement that, okay, this is what you're doing. But, that's not for this conversation. So there's some really interesting activity in Massachusetts, where a lot of interesting wealthy people have donated. I've been in touch with the founder of Butcher Box, Mike, and he put in, I think the article suggested $600K, the article that we linked to that'll be in our show notes around the Massachusetts effort. It looks like a number of other people have put in a few $100,000 as well, Massachusetts residents, which is really interesting. And I think I saw that Dr. Bronner's like contributed up to $1 million to the campaign, which is super interesting as well. I think that was in the article. So, tell me if I'm wrong, everybody, but I think that's accurate. And then they believe they're going to have enough gumption to get over the finish line. So the opposition is interesting. We've chatted about these folks before. Do you remember base daters for natural medicine?
Yeah, I've seen some stuff that I think you and a few others posted online about some of the controversy that was happening over there.
Yeah. Well, this goes back years, right? Like this person, James, who's behind Base Daters, has been a driving force for city by city decriminalization. He's been a major contributor, but for some reason, people keep quitting and don't play with him after a certain period of time. And like, I was getting the sense that there's something not great going on. Following them online, I could see some like, kind of low quality arguments between people in the space. I'm like, that's not really all that great. And then I started getting attacked by base daters for accepting money from Maps and being a paid shill by Maps. I was like, well, my line, Kyle, is always the same. I was like, I would have gladly taken money from Maps, but I have not received any money from Maps. And, just making baseless accusations like that all over the internet seems to be part of his MO. And then he got busted for this really interesting thing. He created a veteran group in Massachusetts. He's not a veteran, and pretended to be a veteran online in front of a lot of organizations, and said the veterans are against this, when every veteran I talk to seems to be for this. I've met very few. I don't know, maybe I met one or two veterans that aren't interested in this as a treatment modality for themselves and others. And that got this guy in a lot of heat. He also took a bunch of money from New Approach PAC that Jack Gorslin and others have kind of discussed, and that money was to support the bill, and he chose to partner with prohibitionists, like these kind of like moms groups or Christian groups against cannabis or against any kind of like prohibition change. And I find that really like a little troubling, that the major opposition, he's getting a lot of press too. So it's not clear that this is going to win. Like my general sense is that the campaign, people working for this, that are working to spend that money and try to get this over the line in Massachusetts, are they're spending a little bit too much time with James on this, and they really should be spending more time like, how do we convince voters or get existing voters more convicted to spread the word, but I'm not on the campaign.
Yeah, and I'm also seeing like some of the other arguments against this is around concern around the black market forming due to expensive licensed therapeutic centers. And I find that to just be like interesting, and that is a valid concern, but I think that kind of points to just a bigger issue here, right? And I think we've kind of seen it in Oregon. I've definitely heard of people talking about not wanting to go to service centers because it's very inaccessible and expensive. I do find it, I guess we'll kind of see how things unravel here in Colorado, since we do have kind of that like bill that allows kind of community consumption, and how are people going to decide to use psychedelics? Is it going to be more in a community and not in a service center? And I don't know. Yeah, it's going to be interesting. I think it's a valid thing to have an argument against, but I think it's a weird thing to argue against for this bill, right? Like, because it does include the decriminalization, and I think that is healthy to have that, right? It's like giving access to people that might not be able to afford it, but also creating, a more structured framework, because people are going to need some of those more kind of structured places to go to work through whatever they're working through. And I think that's something that you and I chat about all the time, is just like a diverse ecosystem. It's not one or the other. It's both and, right? And so it's like we want to see actually a bill like this where it allows people to consume, grow their own, maybe have community use, but also have a legal framework. So if people don't want to do that, or maybe they don't have a community that they feel safe with, they can go to a place where it might be, more structured, more clinical, something that's oriented towards mental health. For those that do have trauma, they might need that, right? They might not be feeling safe in more of a community use setting. And so...
Right. And then there's all the other use cases that don't necessarily fall into this more psychotherapy model, right? Like phantom limb pain, chronic pain, cluster headaches, like microdosing. Like, is there going to be... Like, I think we talked about this. The state of Oregon's getting sued currently by Catherine Tucker and a few others. I forget what the name of the group is, around ADA issues. Like, there's a Disability Act that's kind of in violation-ish. I think it's a weird argument because it's all like, that's federal. Like ADA is federal, and then you have this federal prohibition on drugs, and so it's like, okay, so we're kind of putting two federal things together to talk about how people need home access and or to be able to take home microdoses for certain treatments. I mean, really interesting. We'll see where that goes, but I wonder how Massachusetts will tackle that.
And so they're voting on this just in a few weeks. It's going to the voters.
November 5. So like 8 days from today that we're recording. And for people, we're recording on October 28th. This will hopefully come out this week. And so you can have like some real-time info for the election. I don't know that there's too much else. Ooh, there is. I was wrong. So there's a famous actress. Let me try to find the name. Famous from Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Eliza Dushku has become really a strong proponent for this measure and for psychedelics generally. I kind of remember her from the show. It's been a long time since I've seen that, though. But she had some drug and alcohol issues in her past that she's pretty open about. And psychedelic therapy was suggested by a therapist. Note a therapist taking a leap of faith and not getting in trouble necessarily, and having another major philanthropist in the space as a result. Eliza's then gone on to get training to be a therapist. I think completed the CIIS program as well. And is, I don't really know where her license stands, but it sounds like she's moments away from being able to do client work if she isn't already in some capacity. So I love the idea of, wealthy Hollywood person jumping into the arena in such like a hands-on way. Like, that's super cool.
It's been interesting just watching more and more people come out about this. It has definitely felt like a big kind of cultural shift within the past few years, seeing people kind of come out of the woodwork and have these experiences and start to use their voice and platform to really advocate for the use of these substances. So it's exciting, really exciting. Yeah, I think I was just on her Instagram and seeing her have a whole little rant about psychedelic integration, which was nice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love it. And I think she hosted in their Cambridge, Massachusetts home, where like Harvard and MIT are. She hosted in her home there kind of a fireside with Rick Doblin. Some of our colleagues, Kyle went, some kind of like who's who of Boston were there, getting kind of the rundown, like leadership from like the bigger newspapers in Massachusetts. Like I think the Boston Globe was cited as being there, like the head of that group. And it's really, really neat. I just love seeing that somebody's getting this level of engagement with the demographic that really needs to be included in this conversation.
Yeah, it sounded like they've also funded a lot, some of the research and clinical trials, and her and her husband donated about $7.5 million to
I think that's what I saw. I can't find the
yeah,
article right now. But
a clinic at Brigham and Women's Hospital offering traditional treatments for those with substance abuse. And yeah, they donated $7.5 million in donation to the hospital last August. Yeah, it's really, really awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm just seeing the roster here. Is like Jerry Rosenbaum from Mass General, the owner of the Red Sox was there. George Daly, the dean of Harvard Medical School, is there. It's like pretty awesome. Like, this is a pretty robust list. And yeah, I think they named the clinic after them, which is pretty cool. And she wasn't like, she had a really interesting quote, something along the lines of, I'm not doing this just to have my name on the wall. I'm doing this to say, like, hey, I came from alcohol addiction and drug addiction, and here I am. And she had some chilling tales of her time as a woman in Hollywood in there. So I'd urge people to go check out that article so they can get a sense of it. Like, trying to come up with the name. Who is the Hollywood boogeyman before Epstein? It was like
Weinstein.
I can't remember. Oh, there it is. Yeah, nice. Good work. Yeah, it was like, it's just gross. It was just like pervading that whole culture. And she was victim to part of it and really hurt her. And psychedelics helped bring her back. So,
and it's amazing
you,
too,
Eliza.
Yeah, thank you. And I was just going to say, it's amazing too that, this place that is really focused on substance use disorders could be interested in exploring. And there's a quote here by Joji Suzuki, which is the director of the Division of Addiction Psychiatry. We made it very clear from the very early days that if we're going to get into this, we really want to make it front and center that we're going to utilize psychedelics for research to target both alcohol and opioid disorders, which has been very limited so far. And just thinking about a lot of folks that have struggled with either alcohol or substances and maybe have gone to AA or NA and been open about their psychedelic use and feeling pretty kind of like shamed about it. I think it's an amazing shift for people within that kind of world to get on board here, because I know there's a lot of controversy around whether you're going to treat like a substance use disorder with another substance, something that has profound effects on consciousness. And so, yeah, I think that's a pretty big deal that, even that might be slowly shifting too. Because I know a lot of folks have been kind of shunned out of circles and whatnot for being open about their psychedelic use and their healing potential.
Yeah, there's a lot. I just had a really interesting chat with Dr. Howard Kornfeld out of Mill Valley, like near San Francisco last week. And we had some really interesting commentaries around Suboxone and like why it's so important still, and like analogies from Suboxone to MDMA, which is really cool. So folks, look out for that one. Before we go too much further, Kyle, let's circle back. Like, how was your retreat you just did?
Retreat went really well, minus me getting COVID. Probably thankfully it was towards the end. I started to get a sore throat on Thursday, and then our retreat ended Friday. So I decided to skip Friday because I had a slight positive test. But yeah, overall it went really well. We just hosted our kind of final vital retreat. That was part of our third cohort in Agora Hills. So that was a retreat on breathwork and cannabis. And so we partnered with Ben and Monica, who are part of our first and second vital cohort. They have a beautiful, beautiful center out there in Agora Hills, Holistic Therapeutics, if anybody wants to check that out, where they do cannabis assisted work. And so, yeah, we do 2 days of our breathwork style and then 2 days of the cannabis assisted kind of work. Really, yeah. So you get 1 cannabis and then 1 breath work and then two sitting sessions. Went really well. Seemed like everybody had a really wonderful time. And it's always one of my favorite things to do is to be doing that type of work. So really enjoyed it. And anybody listening from the retreat, yeah, sorry I had to bail out on the last day and didn't get to say goodbye, but yeah, I hope everybody's doing well.
Yeah. I really miss retreats as well. I hope we can get back to some sort of cadence eventually. Like breathwork retreats are one of my favorite things in the world, so would love to figure out a method, a way to get back there. And we don't really have other retreats scheduled, so folks, just stay tuned. If you are interested in that kind of thing, maybe we will have some. We're hoping to make more in-person opportunities for y'all to hang out with us and us to hang out with you. Just Thursday evening, I had a opportunity to present a panel of kind of leaders in Colorado psychedelics. It was Sean McAllister, Veronica Lightning Horse Perez, and Megan Glenn from Plant Magic Cafe, and it was at Plant Magic Cafe. We did it in their kind of normal ceremony space, which is really neat. They do all sorts of psychedelic stuff there, facilitation and otherwise, and I had a great time. It was fun. We sold out on Eventbrite. I don't know if I told you that. And
that's
then,
awesome. How many people were there total?
I would say like we probably had around 15 or 20. We had like 20 or 40 tickets total for sale. So some people chose not to come, which is a little bit of a bummer, but it was still really nice. Yeah. And that was really good. That'll be coming out as a podcast. That was their first ever live podcast recorded there. And we talked about perils and promises of this psychedelic legalization thing. We talked about how Prop 122 in Colorado is going, speculated out a few years ahead, see what things might look like. It was just a really good event.
Any big like takeaways, not spoiling the episode that will be released?
There's a lot of ways forward, and like despite a lot of the folks getting loud about there not being enough stakeholder inclusion, it feels more and more like there's better stakeholder inclusion at the Colorado legalization project. You know, I'm hopeful that we can just keep doing better, and make sure all parties feel acknowledged and heard, and work towards doing democracy well. You know, it's democracy is nothing but messy, if not messy.
Totally.
So yeah, there's some good stuff, and I just, you know, always like being in that room. It was really, really brilliant in there.
And I'm sure we'll probably be doing more events down there. So for those that are in the Denver area, Boulder area, wants to come down to Denver, yeah, I'm sure we'll be going down there. And actually, I think we do have something coming up in January, February? Yeah,
we're working on something for January, and we'll probably be doing even more. So stay tuned, everybody. I'm excited. And then Monday, I did a panel at a bookshop in Denver. Powell's. That's in Oregon. Tattered Cover is Colorado's Powell's. So Tattered Cover is like one of the oldest, biggest kind of bookstore kind of institutions in Colorado, and we got to do a panel. Daniel McQueen was there. Come on, Joe. Sean Lawler was there. He's written for us a bunch, and his book, I don't know if I talked to you yet about this, but his new book is like my new replacement for Jim Fadiman's.
Interesting.
Like Jim Fadiman's Psychedelic Explorer's Guide was my foundational kind of read this first. But now it's Sean's book. And pull up the name because it's just so good. And it's out on Sounds
I'll have to add
True.
that to my list. Sweet.
Yeah.
Do you know if it's out on audio at all?
It will be. It's called The Psychedelic Revival Toward a New Paradigm of Healing. And he's a Naropa grad. He's a therapist. He's doing ketamine-assisted psychotherapy work in Fort Collins. So, you know, he's sticking with it. It's great. And we also had, I really like this guy. He wrote the psilocybin cookbook. Have we ever talked about that? Like, I think way back it was like on our mind.
I don't think so, but I think like when we were advertising some of that, I did come across his profile, and it's an interesting concept. You know, I think I did see some folks like kind of be like, you know, psilocybin degrades with heat. How do you cook with that? And then just also thinking like, yeah, do you want to eat like a nice fancy dinner and trip afterwards? I usually like to fast or not eat much.
Right. Yeah, it's like, how do you get enough in you without like spoiling your stomach and like spoiling the flavor. Like it's a really interesting like set of concerns to have to balance, right? Yeah, man, I really wish I wasn't forgetting his name right now, because we had a lot of really fun conversations. And he's actually the editor-in-chief at psychedelics.com as well. Not editor-in-chief, maybe editorial director. He's like the number 2 in the editorial department there. And yeah, we had a lot of good combos. I asked him what his favorite pasta dish was to cook with mushrooms, and he said, what was it? Risotto.
Actually, that'd probably be pretty good.
Right? Yeah. His name was David Connell, and he's actually an Air Force veteran and a science writer. I had a great time with him, and I hope to get him on the show soon.
Not
and
Orzo.
I definitely said the name of his book wrong. It might have been something else.
Yeah, risotto, Orzos.
Might have been Orzo.
I don't know what else.
I think Orzo. Yeah. And the name of his book is Cooking with Magic Mushrooms, the psilocybin cookbook. Yeah. So that was a fun event. I also got to go to a philosophy conference at Harvard recently.
Yeah, I was going to say, you were on the East Coast for quite a while.
It weighs on you after a bit. The air can be a little too heavy. But yeah, it was maybe 3 weeks on the road. It was a lot. But I got there. United really ruined it a little bit. I showed up halfway through this philosophy conference at Harvard, and it was process philosophy. So Alfred North Whitehead adjacent. There was a bunch of psychedelic people there. I got to see Christine Hauskeller, who worked with Peter Swersted Hughes on this psychedelic philosophy book that we got published in. And then Lenny Gibson, our teacher, was there. It was like kind of the major reason I wanted to go. And then I got to meet all sorts of fun folks there, and smaller than I expected, but it was really neat. It was like kind of maybe half or three quarters of the presenters were from China, which is really interesting because process philosophy is huge over there. And it was a lovely little experience. And got to meet with Charles Stang again, which is fun. He's the head for the Center for the Study of World Religions. Hung out with Andrew Schwartz a bit, who heads up the Center for Process Studies. It's kind of like the group that kind of leads the process philosophy charge, and some of their team, which is lovely. Overall a great time, and I hope we can keep going back to Harvard and maybe develop some sort of cool project to collaborate with them on.
That'd be super fun. I know we've been wanting to do more stuff around like the process philosophy. Joe and I got introduced to them. It was back in 2019. Dream Shadow, Lenny and Elizabeth hosted this small little gathering, which I think we've chatted about before on the show. And you want to go back and listen to an episode we did with John Cobb, recorded there in person, but it was a conference called Can Exceptional Experiences Help Save the World? And yeah, that was kind of our first introduction to the process group, and it was fun. And I think it has played a role in our foundation too, of how we approach some of this stuff. I feel like it's always so complex, and I feel like I'm always trying to learn about that world, but it does create an interesting framework for understanding some of these experiences.
Yeah, hell yeah, it does. It's like, what does it mean to be too Cartesian in a post-Cartesian world that can still benefit from like Newtonian physics and other things like that? And how do we, I started reading The Holographic Universe again the other day, and I think I talked to you about this before, or definitely did before. That's where I learned about Groff. It was Holographic Universe, and it was in my Philosophy 101 class. And Groff was mentioned in the intro, and I didn't realize that because this is like my second time working through it. Since I read it as an undergrad. So it's going to be a really
wrote that
different
book?
Experience. Michael Talbot, who is a science writer. It's free on Spotify Premium, which is interesting as an audiobook.
Nice.
And yeah, like the story that clued me into psychedelic psychotherapy was like, one of these super, super scary things where the lady's kind of having an ESP apparent thing going on. And then Stan was kind of horrified, and things eventually worked out for the best.
Oh, whoa, they showed
And
that story in that book. Yeah, that's a pretty wild story.
that's what sold me. I was like, I need to read this. And it was like condensed. It was only like a paragraph or two.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, like I'm going to go see if this guy has any books in the library. And there you have it. LSD psychotherapy and more.
Fascinating.
So I was like, this can't be right. This can't be right. But I wanted to be right.
That's a really intense story.
Right.
Definitely questions your sense of reality if that, the way that story is portrayed. And
So it talks a little bit about this idea of quantum entanglement, like you shoot two particles in a separate direction at the speed of light, like it's probably photons they're shooting, and you flip the polarity on one, and the polarity on the other flips immediately at faster than light rates. Einstein just rejected this outright and called it spooky action at a distance. And what it's suggesting is that there's some deeper connected order to reality, and that we're kind of like light in extension. We're kind of like extended light, I guess might be a way to put it. Like we're all connected at this like one unified point, like all of the 3D, 4D, and then there's higher dimensional stuff too that's going on. This is just one thing that we've been able to experimentally prove. And I find it really interesting. Yeah, it breaks physics. that one breaks physics. If you study quantum a little bit too much, it breaks physics and some classical physics in some interesting ways. And if we're making assumptions that are wrong metaphysically, we can start spending money in really inappropriate ways, right? Like you can look at how Insel, the former head of NIMH, blew $20 billion in multiple years just doing drug research as opposed to like looking into therapies or psychedelics or anything like that.
Right.
Because we can solve everything through a molecule, which is not necessarily the case. Yeah. So I also got to go to Penn, UPenn, and it was my first time at their campus. It's absolutely gorgeous. And they hosted a conference called Philadelic. It's by the Penn Psychedelic Collaborative. So this is a cool model. You and I don't get to chat much, so I'm just kind of like dumping all my experience on you right now. But what they did was almost really cool. Right? They've done an interdepartmental kind of center. And so the medical school can collaborate, artists can collaborate, all sorts of different departments can collaborate here, because at universities you get really siloed. Everybody's kind of like fighting for resources, so you want to like really protect your own. And like, well, okay, so we're not going to create a psychedelic department here anytime soon, so let's do a center. And we covered this in a podcast with that team. That podcast I think came out late last week. So folks can check that out. I got to record with them at the event, the 4 of the organizers, and that was really great. So what was it? A nurse practitioner, a medical doctor with a specialty in oncology. The NP had kind of like a child psychiatry background, and then a neuroscientist and an artist, like a fine artist. Yeah, so that was really great with a background in like Kashmiri Shaivism, like non-dual tantra kind of stuff, which is super interesting to me. And yeah, I really, really loved that.
How was the conference overall?
The conference was awesome. The conference was really, really unique. It was small. It was in their School of Design, like one of their design buildings. So you got to see all sorts of really interesting art all over the place. That was really fun. Penn is right in the middle of the city. It's really interesting. It's like,
I think I've been there before.
To get there.
Is it like right off the river a bit?
It's not far from the river. Yeah, it's pretty close. Like I think I walked from the river to campus. Yeah, it was my first time taking the train to a conference. I took the train from like an hour away, and every day. Once I missed the train twice. It was like, oh God, I got to take the Uber now. It's pretty horrible.
Jeez.
But I did it, and I got there with plenty enough time. But it was a fun conference and very interdisciplinary. There was gentleman David Glowacki, who I did I kind of like helped with his talk. It was supposed to be a fireside chat, but we got wires crossed. So we chatted about VR and not simulating. I might have sent you this paper. VR creating MEQ scores similar to psilocybin experiences.
Whoa, that's kind of crazy.
Which, right? And there's implications for treatments for end of life. And he's got some really cool funding. I think he's an American dude living in Spain, in northern Spain, which is really cool. And the conversations with him were just mind-blowing, and I had a really great time with him. So I'm hoping to have him on the show soon, and maybe there's some fun VR collaborations we can do. I want to try the software.
The future of VR and AR are going to be pretty wild. I mean, just thinking about like how psychedelic the future is going to be. Seeing like the new like meta glasses and stuff like that. I just always come back to like Terrence was onto it. Terrence kind of like hypothesized this stuff like back in the day where he said, we're going to go back to our primal kind of ancestry, but we'll have a chip behind our eye where we can just, tune in to the environment around us with this chip behind our eye. And it's like, we're starting to get there in a weird way. I mean, it's going to start with glasses, but once we figure out like implants, that's going to be kind of wild. I don't know if it'll happen in our lifetime, but maybe.
Yeah. And Tim Leary as well. One of my friend's uncles getting chemo these days for some cancer, and he was on the news, and he had a big like VR headset giving him like an immersive experience of like a basketball game. It's like for the right people that could be really, really palliative, right? Really helpful. And yeah, I just love this idea of like, so in his app, it's called like Isness D, and then there's another one called Clear Light, but like you're a gaseous form and you just kind of like merge your body space with the others, and you start having like really interesting experiences in a pretty short period of time. And the way he was talking about art and design was just like mind-blowing to me. So, and he's not even really like at his core an artist, he's a physicist. So I was like, this is awesome. Making molecular models, showing Robin Carhart Harris in VR how LSD would bind to the receptor site, and like modeling that out in really cool ways.
Yeah, just even from an educational perspective, being able to like create some of that stuff, it's going to be fascinating once like the tech gets cheaper, development gets cheaper, more accessible.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So yeah, that was really cool. Peter Swarstead Hughes was there. I got to watch him a few times on stage. We got to hang out a little bit. Like he's working on some really cool stuff around metaphysics, like not tarot cards, but like the study of metaphysics and philosophy is like can be a really cool integration tool for folks. I think there's
a big argument that he makes, like psychedelics needs metaphysics. Yeah, not the same metaphysics that we think about when we go into like a metaphysical store, right? As you're saying, a little bit different.
Right. Yeah. It's like, what is our relationship to the universe in like a really interesting structural way, and what is the universe and all that kind of fun stuff. It's kind of like beyond cosmology. And he very carefully said, okay, Aristotle wrote physics. And then he said, okay, well, this is the next chapter, which is after physics, like metaphysics, just the next thing. It's just a second book. And he was kind of the first, like, I guess, super systematic metaphysician. And yeah, it's important. It's really important, I think. And like this concept of ontological shock and spiritual emergence, I think often is an interaction with our internal metaphysical frames. And like, oh shit, the world's very different now.
What do I do with it? Yeah. How do I make sense of this? How do I come back?
Yeah, exactly. So that was good. I heard about a doctor using salvia for animal stroke models, which is really interesting. And he developed a startup recently. So like salvinorin A being like potential agent to help heal some of the damage from stroke, which could be really interesting. Never heard of that before. I was like, oh, good for you for finding good utility for an unscheduled drug. And what else was really incredible? I got to share the stage with some Heroic Hearts people talking about veterans issues. Had some interesting people watching and filming me through that one, which, I don't want to get too into. And then what was the other one? Oh, it was a panel with the organizers themselves, which was really fun. So I got to like dig in deep with them about like, why are they doing it? What are they doing? All that. It was great.
Nice. That sounds awesome. I didn't realize that you had like all those kind of like panels and stuff set up. I thought you were just going to visit and attend. So that's awesome. Shows how much me and Joe have been chatting lately.
Not enough, even though you're my neighbor now. Yeah. So it was a really great conference. I thought there was some really good stuff there. I did observe like a couple like factual inaccuracies here and there on stage, and now I have to like, what is the protocol for letting people know about factual errors in certain presentations? And I don't want to really name that, but it's a learning thing I need to do to be like a helpful colleague. Like, what is the protocol and how do I not be rude about it and all that kind of stuff. So digging in, trying to figure that out.
Yeah. Interesting.
Mm-hmm. And then drove to Niagara Falls. First time I got to bring my dog and partner, which was lovely. And then I flew back to Manhattan, had some meetings with a New York Times journalist in Court Wing, and then spent the next day with Court Wing and some other colleagues just trying to like plan how to frame chronic pain conversations more specifically in the space, and just how we can do it better to keep getting traction, because it is the new hot button issue, and we helped incubate that in a real way, which is awesome.
Have there been any new public developments that you can share about what's been going on with like the Pain Association that you've been helping out with, or just anything that Court's been up to?
So we've kind of talked about it, and I think people might know already, but we had a few of the folks that were part of a case study that was recently published on the show a few times. And the case study was like a 20-year refractory chronic regional pain syndrome sufferer with glossodynia, which is like burning tongue, and a few other kind of horrible situations, like couldn't drive, couldn't use utensils, incredible amount of pain, 1.5 gram monthly infusions of ketamine, and not really all that helpful at a certain period of time, and just no additional help from conventional medicine. So enter psychedelics plus adjunctive therapy, and in remission after one dose. 9 weeks of prep, but like after one dose, you're in remission from 20 years of pain. Accidentally detoxing from Suboxone, or not Suboxone, I think buprenorphine patches, because of like the long acting nature of those to help with some of the pain, and a number of other things. So it's just a somewhat miraculous case study. I think it was the second ever case study of psychedelics with CRPS, which is good. Chronic regional pain syndrome is up there with cluster headaches as some of the worst pains humans can have, as far as we know. Cluster usually says we're the worst, and I've seen here and there that other conditions kind of compete for worst, but this is definitely one of them. And that got published. That's really awesome. Enrollments for the free online coursework are going great. You can find that all at psychedelicsandpain.org. The course is actually on our Teachable, but it's free and available, and it's super high end. So if you or somebody you love is suffering from chronic pain and can't get better, check that out. It's really, really awesome. What else has been going on in the pain world? Just a lot of really great positive attention on pain. Like a lot of real leaders in psychedelia are, including like high-end researchers, are now paying attention to chronic pain.
Yeah.
Because this is one of my consistent things is I don't want psychedelics to be dominated by psychiatry. And I think pain conditions are a great way to help make that the case. If the U.S. Constitution worked properly and the First Amendment worked properly, like we would have psychedelic religions. But we only have a couple of those, like 3 now that have passed through the feds.
Yeah. And it's interesting that we're coming back there, right? Because there was some early research on LSD and pain associated with terminal illness. And so, pain is something that, impacts everybody, right? And to have, treatments, different ways to maybe develop relationships with our pain, I think are really important. So, glad you guys are doing all that work.
And remember, I don't know if we talked about this, the first ever phantom limb psychedelic study was with mescaline pre-World War II Germany. First LSD one was post World War II Japan, phantom limb pain, LSD.
Oh, really? Fascinating.
Super interesting.
Japan. I didn't
published in the
realize
literature.
that. Huh.
Yeah, those guys are still alive. If anybody wants to fund a documentary, reach out. We want to go talk to them before they're gone.
That'd be really cool.
Really interesting stuff there.
Yeah.
And yeah, not too much else to report on the pain front. And we only got a handful of moments left here, but the Eduardo Schoenberg had a recent tweet, and I'm going to read this, and I want you to kind of respond. As a certified facilitator and scientist, I love the current increase in our scientific research with breathworks. One curious aspect, though, and similar to psychedelics, is how the scientific community seems to be lagging behind more experientially based approaches and practices. And the paper he's linking to here is from Oxford, I guess. Breathwork-induced psychedelic experiences modulate neural dynamics. Did you ever read that paper?
I came across it. I don't think I dug into it in detail, but I should get on it and look at it. I would love to see more breathwork research. When I was doing my capstone project in my master's, there's a lot of kind of research on different types of breath work, but not kind of like the holotropic type of style breath work. And I don't know if he's referring to that style of breath work or some other form of breath work, but it would be awesome to see the scientific community to get more kind of involved in those experientially based practices and approaches. Even just yeah, because it's so accessible, right? And I think that's something, we have these really accessible tools, but to have the research back it, to understand it better, I think is so important. And people are always asking, like, how does this work? And the honest answer is like, we don't know. There's not a lot of research here. There's, you could talk about, and Groff points to this, like, is there a change in consciousness due to the physiological aspects of the changes in blood alkalinity, right? Could that cause all these effects? Is it other things? And, I don't think we have enough research there.
Holotropic breathwork does a pretty good job. I don't know if I bragged to you about this. I had Christina Anstan's signature on it.
Is that Psychedelic Science?
No, this is way back. I think it was when they were first selling it. But the appendices, like I talked to Stan about that same question, Kyle, and the appendices in this book, he's got so many citations for like the mechanics of what's happening. And like I want to kind of dig into that more. But yeah, the blood pH thing I think is one, like, the body kind of simulating NDE through weird blood chemistry, maybe. It's an interesting concept, and we don't have a clean answer, but something we need to really research because it's unscheduled for now. And then, if folks want to talk, if you're a researcher and you want to talk about psychedelics including breath work in your research program, because maybe that's easier to fund than psychedelic stuff, reach out.
That'd be awesome. Yeah.
Yeah. And was there anything else? I just appreciate Eduardo, by the way. Like, Eduardo's been doing some really cool stuff and collaborating with Harvard. I think he's in South America. Is that right?
I'm not too sure.
He's in Lisbon.
Okay. Yeah. And just seeing like some of the replies there. And one of his replies was just meaning, overall interest. We've been practicing despite decades of prejudice and skeptical dismissal, both about breath work as well as psychedelics, similar to meditation, yoga, how science dismisses evidence-based practices, which, I guess could also come back to this notion of Whitehead. And I think something that Lenny has paraphrased from Whitehead is, if you want to start with if you want to understand the fundamental nature of reality, start with psyche, start with experience, versus kind of the Newtonian Cartesian paradigm we're in. We start with material, we start with atoms, and we try to figure out that way. And so I think, at least like how Lenny has just talked about Whitehead so much, it's like bringing experience back to science in a sense. And I think it is really important to examine this and start with our experiences, even though obviously, a lot of subjective things come into that, but, how do we also just try to figure it out too? A really great book too I started reading a while ago called The Blind Spot. How science, I forget the subtitle, how science has ignored human experience or something along those lines. But it's a pretty fascinating book. I need to finish it and find time to but, just the first opening chapters were really, really interesting. The argument of just bringing experience back in.
Right. There's this idea, like knowing a thing in itself, like what is the thing in itself? Like what is the totality of that thing? And scientific instruments can measure aspects, but they can't really, including our human perception, right? We can't really get to the core of what the thing is. But we can and should. Like this is a kind of a Tim Leary thing too. Like what is happening with our nervous system? What is happening with our experience? And not really in a qualia sense, but like in a really interesting, like more experiential Gestalt sense, I guess. It's like that's the thing that we are closest to and should potentially start to understand first, and then we can go ahead.
Yeah, and the example that they started off in this book, and I've been thinking about this a whole bunch, and I've brought it up in maybe other podcasts, so this might be repetitive, but they talk about temperature. How do you know you're hot or cold? And sometimes I look at the temperature. What is the temperature going to be outside? But that doesn't really dictate whether or not I'm going to be hot or cold. And I've learned this moving up here to Breckenridge. I love being waking up at the 4th of July and looking at it's 47 degrees out and going, it's going to be freaking cold outside. And then you go outside in the summer morning and it's actually hot because you're so close to the sun. You're like, how is it 50 degrees and I'm like hot and sweating right now? If that was like any other place, I'd be freezing and wanting a jacket or something like that, but we look at the numbers as concrete and and so that's the whole thing of taking abstraction and making it concrete and ignoring like our own experience of like, it's warm right now or it's cold. So interesting thing to think about.
I need to read that book. A lot of people have been talking about it. It'll be within the next 30 maybe books.
Yeah, I know.
Hopefully sooner than later.
Stack just keeps piling up. Yeah,
it's incredible. So we've got a new season of Hyphae Leaks coming out next month. We're planning right now for it to come out November 20th. So that'll be really cool. So that's Reggie and Mary. So Mary's done a lot of writing for Double Blind, Rolling Stone, a bunch of cannabis mags. I think she's been on the show maybe a couple times, I hope. Reggie's been on. Reggie runs Oakland Hyphae Leaks, the blog, and a few other things. And I'm hopeful that, we get some more interest from folks from different communities. Like we're obviously, two white guys on a podcast, so we got to really diversify. I'll send you that song. Have you heard that one yet? Two white guys with a podcast?
No.
It's ridiculous, but
I think about it all the time.
Yeah. So, I'll send that over later.
We did start before podcasting became too cool.
It's true. Yep. I've been podcasting before before anybody really knew what it was. So, we're also working on a Dune webinar that should come out in a week or two, I think. Kind of doing like a mini conferencey thing. Kind of 3 presenters sharing some interesting psychedelic stories that go along with Dune. That's going to be cool. I'm hoping, I haven't talked to you about this one yet either, but hoping to attend the Heroic Hearts Project Gala in Los Angeles in December 5. And if folks want to check that out, go to the Heroic Hearts Project page, see if you can join.
Is that right before Remind then?
2 days after. So I'll have a day between the two. I think Remind's on Tuesday and then this is on Thursday. And Remind is going to be fun too. Like Kyle and I will be there. That's in Las Vegas. That's going to be, at the convention center? I guess we did it last year at a place that was in the convention center. So this will be like actually right next to MJ BizCon, which could be interesting. So I'm excited to be in Las Vegas for that. Do you have anything coming up, travel or event-wise?
No, just Remind, and I think that's it. And then, yeah, we'll be down in, I guess, Denver at the Plant Magic Cafe in January. We'll have more details of that coming out soon. And yeah, so yeah, hopefully get a little bit more rest. Yeah, me and you've both just been on the road traveling a whole bunch. So part of the reason why our Psychedelics Weekly and all that stuff kind of slowed down. I got so busy with Vital, as I've mentioned on podcasts, and yeah, things have just been pretty crazy with the travel and events and trying to keep up with everything. So this has been fun. Yeah, glad that we're trying to bring this back and have time to do this.
Yeah, and with luck, we can land in a place where we have a reasonable pace of life and can do this more regularly.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks, Kyle. Thanks, everybody, for listening to Psychedelics Lately, and can't wait to do it again.
All right. Take care, everybody. Thank you both.